I think the results of this are really going to surprise you, so make sure to stick around, and I'm also going to tell you what I did to apply that second coat. Hey there friends, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be testing 1 coat versus 2 coats of Rubio Monocoat. And specifically what I'm going to be testing is how well it stands up in a typical tabletop usage. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I recently made this table, which is actually a kid's table, and I just put 1 coat of finish on it, which is what the instructions always call for. And as it turns out, not surprisingly, the typical use that my kids applied to this table was a little bit different than what an adult might apply to their kitchen table. But that got me thinking that most people who are using a kitchen table or some other table, whether it's coffee table or end table, are not necessarily going to be making sure they take the best care of it or be really cognizant of the finish when they're using it in their daily lives. So I got to thinking that this really wasn't enough protection for a typical household and how they're going to use their tables. But I really like that finish. I like the color I used, which was the natural tone, which kept the white oak looking really as natural as possible, which is exactly what we were going for. So I didn't want to change any of that. So I decided to apply a second coat. Now for this test, I'm going to be using the Rubio Monocoat Pure, which is essentially their oil finish without any pigmentation. Now my test subjects are going to be white oak, maple, and walnut. And to test the different variables, I have a control, which is unfinished. I have 1 coat of finish on one set, and then I have 2 coats of finish on another set of the boards. Now, before we get started, if you could do me a huge favor, if you haven't already done so, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Now, let's get started. So for my weaponry for this test, I have a lineup of pretty typical things that I think most households would probably have encounter their tables. So I have a washable marker, crayon, colored pencil, Sharpie, macaroni and cheese, grape jelly, chocolate milk, soda, and a glass of ice water. So as you can see, I have a pretty wide array of things that I think a lot of tables are probably going to have to deal with, especially for those with families. And nobody wants to be thinking about their finish when they're eating or cleaning or anything like that. So it really needs to be able to hold up to some hard scrubbing and also to a lot of different things being thrown at it. And that's really what we're going to test for, is to see how much of a difference there is between 1 and 2 coats of Rubio Monocoat finish. Alright, so from right to left I have white oak, maple, and walnut. And these are my control boards. There has been no finish applied to these. Alright, that's my 1 coat. It's pretty interesting how the white oak pretty much stayed as normal. The liquids didn't spread, but on the maple and the walnut without any finish, it spread like crazy. But over here on the 1 coat, the finish is really keeping all of those liquids in one place and they're just beating up nicely. So that's a good start. So now on to my boards with 2 coats of Rubio Monocoat finish. And the colored pencil is struggling to write on them. And that is a huge deal if you have kids that are going to be coloring on the table. I was not expecting that. Let's try this crayon. So what I'm going to do now is wait an hour and let all these different items really soak in, and then we're going to come back and clean them. Well, try to clean them. We'll see. I'm going to use 3 different levels of cleaning aggressiveness. So first, I'm just going to use warm water with a paper towel to try to wipe things off. Then I'm going to use warm water with a paper towel and some soap to try to wipe them off. And then for whatever's left, I'm going to use a washcloth or a sponge with warm water and soap to really try to get aggressive and scrub off any of those stains. Anything beyond that would be something like a magic eraser, things like that, but I know that would probably really actually damage the finish. And that's really one of the reasons I wanted to do this test, because I think a lot of people probably assume they can use a magic eraser, and if they have something that's really not wanting to come off, they're going to jump right to that, and they're going to end up ruining their table. And we don't want that to happen. Whether it's your table or a table that you build and sell to somebody else, we really don't want to see that. So while we wait, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and even hit that notification bell. I'm really trying to grow this channel, and every single click you guys give me really helps me out a lot. Thanks in advance. Alright, here's what everything looks like after just a few minutes. Alright, it has now been about an hour, so now it's time to try to clean up these messes. To do this, I'm going to go one set at a time. So the process here is just going to be cleaning up with warm water on each set, and then adding soap, doing each set, and then adding more scrubbing power on each set. I think this will allow us to compare the different coats well, because we can see at which level of aggressiveness the stains come out, if at all. First thing is just to wipe off all of this excess. At this point, I'm not really trying to clean it yet. So this is just hot water right from the faucet. So the control boards with no finish obviously did not hold up too well. Now onto the one coat, and I'm just going to get off all the excess, and I'm going to be careful to not spread it to the other stains. And now to try scrubbing with warm water. At first glance, one coat performed pretty well on most of these liquids, so let's give that a try with two coats. And there's really no brown or chocolate or soda coming off. Everything basically just came off with the dry pat down. So here we are after just the warm water being applied to clean. You can see one coat versus two coats, and they're honestly basically the exact same. There was no spotting left anywhere, and all of the liquids and the food items pretty much came off right away, no problem. But now the true test begins. We have art supplies that we need to try to get off. Let's see how that works with just warm water and soap in a paper towel. Here's some warm soapy water. And I'm actually going to kind of let that sit there for a few moments, see if it can soak in and do some magic. Okay, a few minutes later, nothing really coming off. So with just warm soapy water, it really didn't change much. If you're making this and you ever think it's going to encounter art supplies, one coat, I don't know, we'll see. So now we're on to two coats. And if this doesn't work, we have one more option that's more aggressive, but not so much that's going to ruin the finish, which is using a washcloth or sponge to try to wipe these off. So we're going to let this sit for a few moments and come back to it. Alright, so two coats definitely perform better than one coat with the crayon. It's almost gone on every single one. It's still there on the walnut. You just probably, I don't know if you'll be able to see that in the camera, but there are still a little bit of lines, about equal to what's left on each of these. But that is much better. So now we're going to move on to scrubbing with a sponge, and we'll see if we can get these stains out. Now I'm going to use my last method that I would be comfortable really using on cleaning these boards or my table is warm soap and water with a washcloth. Alright, let's get scrubbing. Really, basically no difference. That's given a much better scrub. Yeah, that's not really doing anything. It's actually probably a little bit lighter. The Sharpie didn't change at all. But that's really something to consider, especially when I think the results on the two coats is going to be like the crayon was never there. Alright, let's see if we can get this crayon and Sharpie off on the boards with two coats of Rubio Monocoat. Alright, so the crayon is completely gone. Two coats made a difference there. Sharpie is still pretty much there. I have one last option, and that is to use the back side of the sponge. It's more abrasive, and it might actually be scraping off the finish along with the stains. But let's see if it gets it off. Well, look at that. This is two coats of finish. The Sharpie is coming off. I'm going to have to look at it in a different angle and different light. It might just be scraping the finish off though. But you can get it off, even Sharpie. I kind of went out of order, so let's try the sponge on the one coat boards and see if everything comes off as well. It is disappearing, the Sharpie. The crayon looks like it's coming off. The Sharpie not as much. So here we are after everything's been cleaned off. These first three boards are one coat, and these next three boards are two coats. Now I was able to get the Sharpie pretty much off all of them. However, you'll notice when I got the Sharpie off with the back side of that sponge, really what I'm doing is removing the finish. You can see that lighter spot there and here. And on the walnut, it really shows up. You can see really, I was just scrubbing off the finish. And the same goes for the two coats. Getting the Sharpie out, but it's really just rubbing off that finish. So you do not want to have to scrub your furniture with anything more aggressive than a washcloth. If you use the backside of a sponge or a magic eraser or something like that, it's just going to remove the finish and damage the piece. So really, that second coat makes a huge difference when you start factoring in art supplies like crayons that might be used on top of your furniture. From this angle, you can really see that when I was scrubbing to get that Sharpie off the boards with two coats, I was really just scrubbing off the finish. And then on the boards with just one coat, where I had to get the crayon off as well, you can see where I was scrubbing and the finish was coming off across the entire board where the Sharpie and the crayon was. So again, big difference there between one and two coats when it comes to something like a crayon, and I'm sure other art supplies and things as well. Now that we've done the test, what does it all mean? Well, we learned two things for sure. One is that unfinished wood is not going to last. You need to finish your wood. Don't be lazy. But that's why Rubio Monocoat is such a good option for finishing, because it is super easy, anyone can do it, and you really can't mess it up. It definitely takes a lot of the time and effort out of finishing when you can use Rubio Monocoat, even if it's just one coat. But we've also learned that two coats of Rubio Monocoat does make a pretty big difference, especially depending on your uses and your needs. The two coats of Rubio Monocoat was able to protect this board from everything except for the Sharpie. I was able to clean off everything with just some warm water and scrubbing with a washcloth. On one coat, the crayon was not able to come out. They both performed pretty much the same when it came to all the liquids and the food items like the macaroni and cheese and the grape jelly and some of the art supplies. But when it came to the crayon, Two Coats were vastly superior. And I didn't test all the different art supplies there are, obviously, but I'm guessing there are going to be some others out there that would have the same effect. And as you can see here, and where I showed you in some of the other footage, this is where the Sharpie was, this is where the crayon was, and this is the board with two coats. When I scrubbed off the Sharpie using the sponge, I was really just scrubbing off the finish. But because I did not have to use that sponge to scrub off the crayon, there's no damage to the finish. On the one coat, there is damage across this entire board because I had to use the sponge to scrub off the crayon and the Sharpie. So again, that's a pretty big difference, especially for someone like me who's going to have kids using these tables. Another thing I didn't really expect was that I actually felt the second coat of the Rubio Monocoat made the wood look better. It looks more vibrant to me. It has a little more pop of color. I don't know if that's going to show up on video or not, but this is two coats, this is one coat, and to me, the two coats definitely looks better. And here's one coat versus two coats on the white oak. Again, two coats versus one coat. Everything that applied to the walnut applies to this oak. But I also, again, think that the color looks a little bit better on two coats versus one coat. So for me, when I factor in the ease of application, being that it's not really that difficult to add a second coat, the overall look I think is just slightly better, and the ease of cleanup, it's really a no-brainer. Two coats of Rubio Monocoat is superior to one coat. So how did I go about adding the second coat of Rubio Monocoat? Well, it was really pretty simple. I just scrubbed with one of these maroon abrasive pads, and I will put a link in the description below to this, as well as for the Rubio Monocoat. So if you want to support the channel, clicking those links and making your purchases that way really helps me out. But again, I just scrubbed the wood with this very lightly, and what this does, it just gives the second coat something to bond to. But before I applied the coat, I made sure to clean it and get all the dust off and make sure that everything was ready for the second coat, just as you would do with your first coat. And then I just applied the second coat as normal and let it dry and cure as normal, and really I think the results speak for themselves. And one last thing, the table that I applied the second coat of Rubio Monocoat to, that my kids use, it's been about 6 weeks now as I'm filming this video, and it really just looks brand new. I really couldn't be happier with that finish. If you've made it this far, first of all, thanks, and you found it helpful, please make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the like button for that video. I would really appreciate that. See you next time.